Good morning from Bangkok, Thailand, and good evening from Boston, Massachusetts, United States. My name is Orawan Sivunrung Program Knowledge Management Manager from SEAMEO STEMET Center based in Thailand and a Fulbright U.S. ASEAN Visiting Scholar at the MIT Media Lab, Massachusetts, United States. I'm very happy to welcome everyone today to our webinar series, Part 2, Human-Centered AI for Education, Ethical AI Literacy, and the Future of Learning in Southeast Asia. Before we begin today's webinar, I would like to invite everyone to join us in observing 1 minute of silence in remembrance of Her Royal Highness Princess Pacharagitiyapha Narendra Thepayabadi, who's dedicated to public service, justice, education, and the well-being of the people of Thailand. Let us take this moment to reflect on her remarkable contribution and honor her memory with our deepest respect. May I kindly invite everyone to observe 1 minute of silence. Thank you, everyone. Now, let us proceed with today's program. To officially begin with today's program, the Human-Centered AI for Education, Ethical AI Literacy, and the Future of Learning in Southeast Asia, a joint collaboration between SEAMEO STEMET and MIT Media Lab. For today, Part 2, Ethical AI Literacy and Responsible AI for Education. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Dr. Kesara Amon Wutiwon, the Center of SEAMEO Regional Center for STEM Education, to deliver the welcome and opening remark. Dr. Kesara, please, the stage is yours.
Distinguished Professor Dr. Cynthia Brazil, Dr. Daniela Daipola, Dr. Kanwan Rogers, esteemed colleagues from MIT Media Lab, honored representatives from the Ministry of Education, educators, friends, and colleagues. A very good morning from Bangkok, Thailand, and good evening to our friends joining from the United States. On behalf of the SEAMEO STEM-Ed, it is my pleasure to welcome you to Part 2 of our webinar series, Human-Centered AI for Education, Ethical AI Literacy, and the Future of Learning in Southeast Asia. Today's session reflects our shared commitment to preparing learners, educators, and systems for an AI-enabled future, one that is advanced, ethical, inclusive, and deeply human. As AI transforms how we learn and teach, we must ensure education continues to nurture creativity, empathy, ethical judgment, and collaboration. At SEAMEO SEMED, we see AI literacy not just as an understanding the technology, but as empowering educators and learners to use it responsibly and ethically. This vision aligns with the SEAMEO Strategic Plan 2025 to 2030, and also with our 5-year development plan and UNESCO's recommendation on the ethics of AI. Our collaboration with the MIT Media Lab marks an exciting milestone, bridging global innovation with regional implementation. We are deeply honored to welcome Professor Dr. Cynthia, a pioneer in social robotics and AI education, along with Dr. Daniela and Dr. Kanwan, whose work advanced ethical AI literacy worldwide. This webinar is more than a session. It is the beginning of a broader regional conversation. We hope it inspires partnerships, new ideas, and actions that enable Southeast Asia to lead in developing literate citizens who are both technologically capable of ethically ground. Finally, I extend sincere appreciation to MIT Media Lab, our organizing team, and all participants. Together, let us shape a future where AI empowers human potential and ensure education remains centered on people, values, and meaningful learning. Thank you, and I wish everyone an inspiring and fruitful webinar.
And thank you for joining to Zoom, and also for some audience who join us through the YouTube also. Yes. All right. Without further ado, right now it's my great honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Cynthia Brasella from the Massachusetts, United States, and from the MIT Media Lab. Professor Cynthia is the Dean for Digital Learning at the MIT, Director of the MIT-wide Initiative on Responsible AI for Social Empowerment and Education, and the head of the Personal Robots Group at the MIT Media Lab. Internationally recognized as a pioneer in social robotics, human-centered AI, and AI education. She's lead the global effort to advance responsible AI, ethical AI literacy, and equitable AI education. Joining Professor Dr. Cynthia today is two distinguished members of her research team from the MIT Media Lab. Dr. Daniela DiPaola and Dr. Quantuan Rogers are the research scientists who work focused on the personal robot and specializing in human-centered AI, AI literacy, and inclusive learning. Together, they are advancing innovative research and educational initiatives that empower learners and educators to use AI responsibly and ethically. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to give a warm welcome to our keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Cynthia, together with Dr. Daniela and also Dr. Quantuan today from MIT Media Lab. Professor Dr. Cynthia, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much. Let me share my slides. I have to send a request to share. There we go.
Yes, we got you now.
Go share. And then, okay.
Yes, look perfect.
Okay, there we go. Wonderful. So good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here and to bring two members of my team. We're very excited to share with you our work and our thoughts around human-centered AI. and education and our work on ethical AI literacy and more. I've enjoyed a couple of my visits to Southeast Asia. We actually have a few collaborations in your region, and I hope that this talk will help start more opportunities for collaboration in the future. So just to begin, I'd like to talk a little bit about the MIT RAISE initiative and kind of our values and where we come from in terms of the kind of work that we do at MIT RAISE. So as you've heard, RAISE stands for Responsible AI for Social Empowerment and Education. We started this initiative at MIT around 2021. So of course, this was before ChatGPT and the whole movement around generative AI. When we were noticing and knew about how AI was being infused in many of the digital tools and services and applications that people were using every day, but people were not aware of that. We of course were aware of how these AI tools and technologies and algorithms were shaping our media and shaping kind of our opinions and shaping our behaviors, but that was not widely known to the general public. And so we recognized that it was becoming critical that people of all ages not just be digitally literate, but become AI literate. And so we established RAISE, and with that, we started pioneering what's now known as AI literacy. And we felt it was particularly important for children to become AI literate because children were becoming prolific users of these kinds of tools and platforms such as social media. So we also were early pioneers in K-12 AI literacy, and one of the first groups to even introduce the idea of ethics in AI for youth. So we are really, very early in this space. We have a long tradition of constructionist pedagogy, learning through making at MIT, and we've been bringing all of that to bear for AI literacy. So this is just kind of a slide to kind of set the kind of long tradition we have at MIT of advancing science, design, technical innovation, pedagogical innovation, of how disruptive technologies, from the personal computer and the internet and mobile computing and now AI in transforming education. MIT has always been there, pioneering that every step of the way. We have this strong ethos of empowering people, and we really mean everyone with these technologies. We believe these are, everyone should be able to shape the future with these kinds of technologies. And we do that through co-design. We do that through helping people build capacity through open source code and open educational resources. And I'm sure, as many of you know, MIT led the whole open course, open software movement, which became the open educational resource movement. And so we bring that rich tradition to our work with MIT RAISE. And so we, are working across the globe, with many countries and many organizations, towards a human-led future with AI. We believe that AI, again, is for everyone, towards a future where, everyone is able to flourish as we work and learn with AI, towards a shared prosperity in the era of AI. So this is just where we're really coming from as we share all of this work with you. This is really what we're hoping to build and create with you all around the world. So, why do we believe AI is for everyone? If we start to look ahead in what's happening in workforce around how AI is transforming jobs, not surprisingly, I'm sure many of you are well aware, many of the job postings analysis that we're seeing, not just in the technology and computer science oriented professions, but across all professions, STEM and non-STEM, we're seeing increasing explicit demand for AI skills. So this slide is basically taken from basic job postings across healthcare, finance, business, all kinds of areas where you're seeing an increasing demand for explicit AI skills. And so it's not surprising that whether you're pursuing STEM profession or non-STEM professions, companies are just expecting you to be skilled in AI. So of course, this is increasing the expectation for students in general of being skilled in these technologies. So again, this is increasing kind of the expectation that no matter who you are in your educational journey, you should be skilled in AI. This is just a slide from many, many, many industry reports, interviewing, surveying many, many, many companies, different sectors. It's not just technical skills. Human skills are also very, very important. Companies are still looking for people who are capable of critical thinking, ethical judgment, creative problem solving, human skills of communication, teamwork, ethical judgment. So just to say, when we talk about entering the workforce, it's not just about technical skills, although there's increasing demand for that. Still, these abilities to work with people, to communicate, to have discernment, critical thinking are also in tremendous need and demand in the workforce. When you look at youth today, we're seeing youth adopting and using AI in particular almost at an alarming rate. And I say almost an alarming rate because as we look across the globe, and I mean, when I particularly look at AI literacy and instruction in my own country, it's the children are adopting it much faster than the teachers and the educators. So, you know, when you look at these surveys, you often see youth adopting AI much faster than the educators are AI literate. So again, there's this concern about, are we able to, keep pace with our youth who are using AI to communicate, to socialize, to learn, and, again, this is really, disrupting our educational systems in order to try to provide the wisdom and the guidance to be able to keep pace with the rapid, again, adoption of our young people. So all these things are happening all at once. So again, this is just to motivate. AI literacy is for everyone of all ages, and there's more increasing pressure and demand for all students, and I would argue all teachers, to become AI literate. This is happening worldwide. So with all of that, we actually have anticipated that in a lot of ways with AI Raise and even across many organizations around the world, and that there are, and I'm sure many of you are aware, a number of AI literacy competency frameworks. MIT Raise and other organizations like UNESCO and OECD have been very involved in establishing and creating these AI competency frameworks that have been globally adopted. And they are often have very similar themes that are very resonant actually with the themes of this webinar, which is actually really terrific to see. So if you look across these, the ability for young people to be able to understand how AI works, the conceptual knowledge is common across all of these frameworks. Being able to understand the responsible use, kind of ethical application, responsible design is common across all of these frameworks. The ability to understand AI as a social technical system, applications of AI in society, being able to appreciate not only the benefits, but potential risks of AI technologies is common across all of these frameworks. The ability for all children to be able to create and make things with AI technologies is common across all of these frameworks. I feel pride in that. I feel MIT has actually had a very influential role in those elements of these frameworks. So just to say, there's a lot of frameworks out there today. These topics that we're speaking to you today are commonly held across them. And so I think there's a lot of, common ground that the world has in these topics. So then the question is, how do we actually implement them, right? What are the pedagogical principles? What are the curriculum? What are the professional development things that allow us to actually enact them? And I think what you're going to hear from us today is more of where the implementation opportunities are. When you talk about a lot of these competency frameworks, they're really, coming from three kind of broad perspectives about how do we prepare young people for the present as well as into the future. So from the personal standpoint of the child who's already using technologies and applications that have AI embedded within them, they're already creating things with these medias, as we know. It's about the safe and wise personal use, the creative use of these tools, so that they can propel their learning and expression in a way that they can flourish. That's very important. We want to prepare them to be professionals, to be able to be successful and skillful and competent in their ability to work and use these tools, and to do so with people in the professional workplace, and to do so responsibly and ethically with discernment. But we also want to think about them as citizens with civic engagement, whether that's from their local community or a digital citizen or a member of society, right? So a lot of those frameworks, they're really thinking about AI from all of these different lenses. And I think that's also important to appreciate. So a lot of thinking has been put into a lot of these kinds of frameworks. With all of that said, MIT RAISE has developed a lot of different curriculum. So this slide is basically just highlighting a number of different curriculum that we have actually designed that represent a range of different formats, from very short modular, lessons. Day of AI represents kind of short format modular curriculum for kind of limited time opportunities. Day of AI is used in 170 countries around the world. I'm going to talk more about that. To long format, semester long, multi-year long curriculum like RICA. I'm going to show you a little bit of video about that. To summer intensives like Future Makers. So we have developed a wide range of curriculum. I will tell you, they are all aligned with those frameworks I just shared with you. And there's all aligned with that ethos that I presented with you on that first slide. So the common kind of core ideas and principles are held across all of these curriculum. But again, a lot of materials, a lot of formats, a lot of these, again, have been designed to be open and freely available for use. So just to say, there's a lot of content out there. This is what we've designed. A lot of other people have also designed a lot of curriculum as well. So this is just, an example. I want to take some time, because I think we explicitly mentioned this in the advertisement of this webinar, around the Day of AI materials, because this is probably our most popular set of materials that have been, implemented at scale very successfully in over 170 countries. So when I mentioned at the beginning of this talk about us having deployments at large within the Southeast Asia region, most of those deployments are with Day of AI, collaborations with in some case, national deployments of the Day of AI curriculum. So as I mentioned, this is modular short format curriculum. A lot of this is because we recognize teachers have a lot to teach already. So it is short format, allowing teachers to fit it into already very busy curriculum. It is designed with topics that are relevant in humanities and STEM and computer science, so for STEM and non-STEM subjects. It is designed to be suitable for a wide range of technology-enabled classrooms, and there's more and more effort to design materials for less technology-enabled classrooms as we go into more developing countries and so forth. We try to design modules that are actually very timely with the topics that are constantly coming up as we learn more, study more about AI. I'm going to highlight some of those with you today. As I mentioned, these resources are open and free because we recognize as we bring these to other countries, you have to be able to localize them to the cultural and educational context. It's an unusual set of materials in that they literally cover all grade bands from kindergarten all the way through high school. There are a lot of resources and formats for teacher professional development I can touch on, and they are aligned with UNESCO and OECD framework. So this represents a very rich body of materials. There's a QR code. So this is a place that if you're looking for materials that adhere to those frameworks I mentioned, this is a good place to start. It's a good place to start. If you go to the website, just to say, you will see a lot of short format lessons like this, from single individual lessons to short format, say pockets of 4 lessons, to stackable curriculum that could last, again, weeks to like a semester if you choose. There are things that are more technical, like learning how machine learning works. You can see a lesson here on AI effort and your brain. There's more studies coming out about cognitive offloading that's giving people concern. I'm going to talk more about that. There's here things about deep fakes and so forth. These are timely topics. we go to the next slide, you'll see there's a number of things around AI and ethics, AI in sports, things that students care about, AI in elections, all kinds of things, AI in arts and creative media. So again, if you just peruse these modules, you'll see it's just a wide range of topics that if no matter what subject you teach, chances are there's something here that is relevant to you and your students. So I just want to, again, give you a sense of the breadth of the resources. This is a slide just to give you a sense of the impact. So I mentioned we're in already 170 countries. The team at the Day of AI, a nonprofit that we spun out to meet the demand, has trained already over 75,000 teachers in these materials across the globe. And we've reached almost, I guess, probably by now, actually over 3.5 million students. So these are materials that have been used quite a lot. And so you can have confidence in that these are materials that many, many people in many different countries, in many different cultural contexts, have been able to successfully adapt and implement. And I think that's important to know. We've done a number of evaluations. So these are some of the key UNESCO metrics or standards that we talked about. Even with short format curriculum, you can see a significant gain or boost, which is good to see. So again, we have impact reports, we have journal publications you can see. So we do evaluate, and this is by an independent education research company. So again, we do a lot of research on this work. We've done research studies comparing the professional development of these curriculum versus other AI literacy courses. So this is a recent study that was funded by WISE, comparing Day of AI and other AI literacy curriculum across multiple countries here. This is just a slide kind of giving some highlights. Again, you can see these are AI literacy courses put out by Google and Code.org and Microsoft. Day of AI actually did, the best in terms of highest self-reported learning gains by instructors, as well as confidence and implementation in their classroom, which is great to see. So just to say there's a lot of, I guess, confidence in teachers, positive teacher response to these materials and their preparation. So again, just to say, when you talk about materials that you think, you would want to look at and implement, there's lots of reasons to feel that the Day of AI material is worth taking a look at. I just offer them with something concrete that you would want to check out. But now I want to shift and basically ask the question, there's a lot of great thinking around AI and ethics and making, but is the current framing of AI literacy actually enough? And I ask this within this framing of, we had the, phones coming into classrooms and social media coming into classrooms. And, there were risks that were posed with that. There was, things that were, diminishing learning when they entered in. And now there's concerns that AI actually can diminish learning as well. And these are very recent studies that are starting to come out. And so there was a recent reports put out by the Brookings Institute, Prepare, Prosper, and Protect. And this is one of the quotes from that report that I just want to share because I think it kind of encapsulates the concern, which is cognitive development requires the effortful processing, mistake-making, and problem-solving that AI too easily circumvents and that many students are willing to bypass. Used liberally, AI is not a cognitive partner, it is a cognitive surrogate. It does not accelerate children's cognitive development, it diminishes it. This is a real concern right now that a lot of educators and a lot of researchers are expressing, and not just us. In this report, they surveyed teachers, parents, students. They are also aware of the risks of what is called cognitive offloading, over-relying on these kind of chatbots, et cetera, where over too much dependence on these technologies could actually result in atrophying, cognitive atrophying, social atrophying of these skills, or if you do it when you're young and still developing these skills, risking not developing these skills in a normal way. And so again, if you look at this chart here, undermining cognitive development is the biggest concern across students, parents, and teachers, but also impeding social and emotional development is a pretty significant concern here, threatening relationships and trust, is also a concern. So this is significant, I guess, is what I'm sharing with you. This is a fairly recent set of concerns that have surfaced, but these are not addressed in the current AI literacy framing. These have come out after those frameworks were introduced. So now we're thinking at MIT RAISE about this idea of resilience. And so if you think about what is resilience, resilience is the capacity to recover from difficulties, adapt to adversity. It's not about avoiding hardship or like accepting degradation. It's about bouncing back or even forward when things go wrong or we experience atrophy, right? It's about kind of being stronger, right, in the face of having things go wrong, right, or things being unexpected. And so how can we introduce this idea of AI resilience? And I think we need to think about that. So when we, at MIT and the Media Lab in particular, if we go back to our roots, we can look to people like Seymour Papert. And Seymour Papert, he's like one of the founders of the Media Lab. He talked about things like hard fun. And Seymour said, fun and hard are not opposites. Children don't want just easy, frictionless experience. They want to be challenged in ways that feel meaningful and self-directed. The struggle is part of what makes it satisfying. So when you talk about productive struggle, Seymour is talking about a way to make productive struggle something that children actually want to do, right? This is a really important insight. Of course, he's the father of constructionist learning, which is learning by making. So students draw their own conclusions through creative experimentation and making objects that others see and use. This is, again, about agency, not sitting back, being passive, losing confidence, but owning and having agency in what you do. So I think these are important ingredients as we think about learning experiences that I think can counteract the risks that these chatbots might pose to help children build AI resiliency. And so this is now within RAISE kind of how we're thinking about, again, going back to our kind of MIT roots and our kind of Media Lab roots about, can we add resilience to the AI literacy framing, call it holistic AI literacy, which is building on all the great stuff we've talked about these frameworks, but now adding this, right? So when we think about curriculum and ingredients, empowerment is important. Civic engagement, I think, is important. Connecting to people and community beyond yourself, I think, is increasingly important because children are isolating themselves and just talking to chatbots in a really frightening amount, right? They need to connect to people, to community, projects with peer, again, social interaction, developing social emotional skills. And again, that notion of hard, fun, productive struggle, resilience, deep engagement. This is really important to really focus on, I think is super important, right? So to really own this in our learning experiences for children, I think is super important. So we are now thinking, right, constructionist pedagogy for holistic AI literacy, kid power, right? So this is kind of this constructionist computational action framework, learning by making and learning by making a difference, engaging community and projects with peers. So this is kind of how we're thinking about framing and learning experiences, kind of bring all of this together. So the human skill development, the teamwork, creating things with purpose, enabling kids to make a difference with meaning, the hard fun. We're trying to think about pedagogical experiences, curriculum that enables this kind of learning. And we create tools and learning experiences that embody that. We call this computational action. So I'm just going to show you a video that this is the Rika curriculum. This is a school in Dubai we've been working with. So this is a project that these two, I think these are middle school students actually made with App Inventor that again just kind of showcases when you empower these young people with computational action and tools, what they choose to make, right? What they choose to make that kind of embodies all of these ideas.
So this is Autista Search, and we made it using MIT App Inventor. So basically, we have some friends who have autism, and it's hard to go out with them because places are too crowded. They're not friendly, they're busy, they're loud. So we can't go out with them. So we created this app, and it basically gives you the best places to go with when you have people with autism, and it shows friendly places that you're able to go to. So show them how the app works.
So this is our app. This is the main home screen. And if you click on to search a venue, it will open up this screen. Now, you have three main options. One is the suggestions, which is AI. So you click on restaurants and click search. This will use AI to give you the 15 best restaurants that are good for autistic people, as you can see. We have our suggestions, which me and Rory have done some research to find out the best venues for autistic people. And if you tap on any of these markers, it will use AI to give you a description of the place and why it is autistic friendly. And our final feature is Google Maps. So if you click on this button here, it will take you to a port of Google Maps that functions exactly like the normal one. So you can search venues, gives you directions, you can look at ratings of all restaurants or places you want that the app has suggested for you. And that's it. That is search.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, I mean, these middle school students built a pretty impressive app so that they could go out with their friends who are on the autism spectrum. That's pretty cool when you think, right? That's pretty cool. So again, computational action, the power of young people, and constructionist, kid power, hard fun, all there, right? So again, what do kids create with AI? They do a lot of amazing stuff. You know, they want to create a more just society, a thriving planet, flourishing people. We see this again and again. We see this again and again. It's up to us to empower young people with the tools and curriculum to be able to do this. So I'm just going to wrap up. I'm going to turn this over to Daniela next. We're seeing here the importance of including student voices, and Daniela, I know, is going to speak to this more through a different lens. Again, AI resilience, holistic AI literacy, this is really important. And this is about preparing young people towards a human-led future with AI where they can flourish working and learning with AI. And there's real urgency about this. I feel there is real urgency about this. All right, I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Daniela. All right.
Thank you, Cynthia. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Daniela DePaula. I'm a postdoc at the MIT Media Lab. I'm here to share my work about responsible use and policy in the age of AI. So I think before we even dive into what responsible use is, Cynthia mentioned it as one of these key ideas of one of the goals of AI literacy. Students should use AI in responsible ways, and they should also be a citizen in the age of AI. But I think it's worth pausing and thinking about what are we actually working towards? First, again, like Cynthia mentioned, I see this idea of adaptability and resilience will be especially important for youth in a changing technological landscape. Secondly, students will need an age-appropriate knowledge and use of technology. They need to have tools that are safe for them and also that allow them to explore in an age-appropriate way. They need a sense of self and confident in their own abilities and decisions. Continued connection with other humans. These relationships that youth build are incredibly important for their emotional and social development. And the ability to contribute to and participate in a democratic society. And that gets at this citizenship piece. And what is it really exciting about the field of AI literacy? Since its founding, there's been so much attention paid to how we are teaching children about ethics at the same time as technical concepts. And while this is a really important goal, I feel like right now ethics has only been taught as a way of understanding the positive and negative consequences of AI in society. And this limits our understanding of ethics as something intellectual to be mastered and less about a practice that we apply to our use of AI every day. And UNESCO has moved a little bit further towards this goal of citizenship and understanding that youth need to be able to apply their knowledge of AI to the different ways that they'll see AI in their lives. However, they have not specifically outlined what competencies youth need to develop in order to get to citizenship. And so my work looks at what specific competencies do we need to teach youth in order to help them develop into responsible citizens. So first, I think students need to understand how AI works. This is just gaining a general intuition for the data that powers AI systems and how that data leads to predictions. Secondly, students need to understand how AI impacts society. I see this in two key ways. First, it's understanding that technology is a socio-technical system, meaning it's embedded with values and opinions and ideas from the people that create it, and it also acts on society around it. Secondly, I think they need to understand the actual ethical consequences that come with specific technologies. So for example, algorithmic bias and machine learning algorithms. These two areas I would consider the current state of AI literacy, and there's been so much work done across RAISE, but also across the field of AI literacy to get at these two questions of how AI works and how it impacts society. But I think in order to move towards this idea of responsible use, we need to think one step further and think about how we're going to apply our knowledge of AI into practice. And I think that begins with helping students understand what values they care about and their community cares about, and then understanding how they use AI in a way that aligns with those values. And this is moving from the technical competency that gets us towards workforce readiness and gets us towards being able to build things for our community, but moves towards how do we actually use tools that we are given every day in society. And I want to demonstrate kind of how this might show up in a decision that students have to make every day. So let's walk through this framing. Let's think about a high school student, much like the students that have to navigate AI today. So the student enrolled in an introductory computer science class has a quiet personality, prefers not to participate in class discussions, and completes all of the problem sets on his own. He has done well so far in class with this approach. However, the class just started a new unit on a RAISE, and he's feeling completely lost. He received a bad grade on the first problem set, and he's been struggling to keep up in class all week. So the student's realizing I need to make a change to my study habits if I want to do well in this unit. And he knows that his teacher offers office hours every week, but he also overheard his classmates talking about this cool new chatbot tutor that they used on the last unit that the class spoke about. So the student's left with this question: do I go to my teacher's office hours? Do I use the chatbot? Do I do both, or do I do nothing? So the student will be able to make a better decision if the chatbot is right for them, if they knew how the tutor operates. So this is a understanding that chatbot tutors are probably trained on large language models, and that comes from lots of text and fine-tuned on specific data. And they might need to understand that LLMs make a prediction rather than pulling from existing sources. This helps the student understand that they should take the tutor's responses as a suggestion rather than a fact. Secondly, with the socio-technical framing, the student will understand that AI has some impact on the system around it. So the student might find out that the tutor is going to teach them computer science in a way that is different than the teacher would. They also might understand that the school's policy permits AI tools, but they know their teacher disapproves and will have to grapple with those two ideas at once. And again, this is one, understanding how the technology works, but two, where the technology is situated. Next, we're talking about virtues. What values does the student care about and their teacher care about, or the community around them? And so the student might recognize that both him and his teacher value this idea of flexibility. And so switching up his style of learning is already valuing flexibility. So it doesn't matter if he goes to office hours or a chatbot tutor. He might also reflect on the idea that his parents value independence. And with that in mind, maybe he won't change his style because he feels like his parents might value him working through this problem on his own. Finally, the student needs to understand how they will uphold the values that they have through the actions they take. And what comes here is a piece of reflection, where I think this is really important. This is a place where I think that educators can demonstrate how we apply our values in the classroom before the student is faced with a dilemma like this. So we can facilitate both an experiment where students are trying out the chatbot tutor in class, but also trying out having a 5-minute office hour session or mock office hour session with their teacher as well. So they can practice these different methods and reflect on them. The teacher could facilitate this reflection. They could have conversation with their peers about their experiences with both. And then the next time that they're struggling on a problem set or struggling studying for an exam, they'll have these experiences that they can pull from and that they've already reflected on so that they can make a better decision on how they want to use it in the future. And I think what I'm talking about here sounds a bit like media literacy, which it's been something that we generally agree upon it being important. It has had mixed results. And I think one of the reasons it does is because it's a set of rules that students are given to follow rather than a continual practice that they are working towards being better at. And virtue ethics offers a very, I think, compelling framing for us to be able to think about how students should be applying their own values to the use of technology. It moves away from this idea of rules to an idea of taking actions that align to our virtue. So your action might be different in any given scenario based on the virtue you have. And I'll give an example of that in a moment. But it's really well suited for AI because it's contextual, it's collective, it requires a shared understanding of a value or virtue. It develops over time, given the changing pace of technology. We want something that's flexible and allows us to kind of come up with the rules over a longer period of time. And then finally, what I think is really exciting for the classroom, again, where I demonstrated in the classroom reflecting on different tools and experiences, virtue ethics, a requirement for virtue ethics is reflecting on the decisions you've made and then making a better decision the next time and always trying to improve oneself. And again, I think this works towards this idea of resilience where you're continually thinking about how you're using a piece of technology and trying to make yourself better. So I want to give an example kind of how this might show up in a scenario and how virtues might show up in how teens use technology. We can think about a teenager on their phone, teenager having access to social media. We could make a rule and we could say to them, there's no phones at the dinner table. But we could also say that the virtue at the dinner table is care. And so everything we do at the dinner table has to align with this virtue of care. And if this is the case, the student might use their phone differently. If they're having a nightly family dinner, they might want to show care to their family members around them. If they have a family dinner with relatives who don't live near them, they might be even more likely to not turn on their phone because they want to be present to the people around them. And then we might see the child use their phone differently if they're checking in on a friend who just had an important surgery. So this might be a really good context in which they want to demonstrate care to somebody, and their phone is a really good way to do that, and it allows them to connect with somebody else. However, if we had this rule that says no phones at the table, they would just follow that rule rather than think about contextually how they might apply their use of technology to the situation. And again, I really just want to highlight this idea that virtue ethics is iterative, and we should always be encouraging students to reflect on their use of technology and if it was aligned with their values, and then help them make decisions over time. And we need more of these opportunities to apply this framing. And what's really exciting as well is values are this framework that many schools are already very familiar with. And so can we build off of this to not only teach students the values of their community, but also potentially we've been grappling with how to design policies around AI as well. So, and if we're thinking about applying this to the policy space, I think right now the approach of AI policy has been around what tools are being used, and then thinking about what rules and policies can we create for those tools. But if we take a values framing for this, we think more about what we care about first, and then how do we create policies where AI can be used to support and not detract from that. And so I'll very quickly share an example of how we've done that with a school. So we worked with the school district locally in the United States, and we had the goal for them to create a value statement. So this school specifically Their values were classroom, culture, and community. And so the first thing that we did with them is we said, okay, let's take one of these values, culture. What does that value mean to you? And we have these great stories that the community was sharing, not even speaking about AI, but what this idea of culture meant to their community. And it was things like family values, teamwork, feeling understood. There were some really beautiful stories about community members checking in on somebody else or bringing them a meal when something, when someone was sick or wasn't feeling well. Other moments where teachers were staying after school to support students who really needed the extra help. And this was a great grounding conversation before we brought in the conversation of AI because it helped the community remember what they cared about. After we had this conversation, we had them think about the ways that AI has positively or negatively impacted their district or could positively or negatively impact their district. And what we did was we had them map those positives and negatives to the different values that we had already spoken about. So what I really like about this framing is it helps them see the ways that AI can uphold what they care about and the ways that AI might undermine what they care about. And again, this is coming from the values that the community already holds, rather than saying, here's the tool, let's think about how the tool might fit in to what we're doing. And we did these with all of the values that they held. And then we actually helped the school districts create value statements that were grounded in the things that they cared about. And again, focusing on how we could successfully and not successfully use AI to support or undermine that value. I want to talk about one last project because I think this project really talks about the importance of student voice in all of this conversation around values. And the importance kind of this whole framework in getting students from thinking about how AI works all the way to actually applying their values in practice. And so with Student Voices in AI, this is a program that we developed that's over 12 weeks. And the first part focuses on how AI works. The next part focuses on how AI relates to the values that the school holds. And then finally, it helps students understand how they can impact policy. And again, similar to the framework I shared earlier, this is going from technical competency to everyday practice. And there's been many activities that students walk through that are related to their actual experiences as a student, the things that they're doing every day in the classroom. So for example, they're learning how different tools that their teachers use work, thinking about how those tools might promote some of the values that they have, or might actually bring risk to the classroom as well. They're thinking about what their community cares about. They're doing interviews with community members, understanding how their fellow students and their teachers are using AI. And then finally, they're applying what they've learned about their school, what they've learned about AI in order to help their school create a policy. This program has been piloted over the past year with schools in the United States, and we've finalized the materials in 12 weeks of ready-to-use materials, which you can find here. This is kind of meant to be an in-school council for students to be able to explore some of these ideas and help their administrators and teachers guide the proper use of AI. All right, so with that, thank you so much, and I will pass it over to Cantuan.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Daniela. Let me share my screen. Let's see. That should be working. Yeah, so thank you. So I'm the last one up, and I don't really know if my session here is going to answer any questions or cause some more, but I do want to start with a rather provocative thought exercise. So I want you all to imagine you have a friend who's dying, and you have to rush them into the hospital. And then you get into your AI assisted car. And as soon as you get in there, your AI assisted car says, hey, I detect police ahead. So you should stay under the speed limit, or else you're going to get pulled over and it's going to take you longer to get there. So the question is, what do you do? You're driving down the street, trying to get your friend to the hospital. They're bleeding out in the back seat. Do you speed? Like, are there cops on the side? What do you do? It's a very high intensity situation. And you're trying to decide, do I speed or not? But then you get to the end and you figure out that there were actually no police there, and your AI assistant gave you false information. This was part of a study we had done a couple of years ago, but the question I want to ask you is, would you have sped or not? And what we found was that people were actually 3.5 times more likely to not speed when we gave these instructions as being framed as coming from their AI assisted car as opposed to just some text for the experiment. And so this is not just like a lab experiment where people are kind of over trusting what AI and robots do. This is happening all the time in everyday life as well. There's so many headlines now where there's people driving their cars into lakes because their GPS told them to do so. We have lawyers who are using AI for their case creations and it's fabricating sources. We have people who are listening to ChatGPT for diet advice and then end up taking like poison and getting sick. We have people who are using AI advice to invest and they are losing money. And even more seriously, we have people who are getting into relationships with AI systems and following what they say. And for one man, this led to his death because the AI gave a weird address for him to go to and he ended up falling. And so, like, people and humans as a whole are over trusting these AI systems. Um, you yourself might not think you do, but I'm sure in some cases you actually do. But when we think about what types of people are even more trusting of these systems, well, that'll be kids. Because we know that kids place even more humanism onto these systems and believe that they have more feelings and more things that adults might. And this in itself is rather concerning from like the things that we've talked about with like Cynthia's talk and also Daniela's, but it's even more concerning because children are also often left out of the conversation of the designing of these systems. And so they themselves are living their whole lives built in the society that we're creating these very alluring AI systems, but oftentimes they're left out of the conversations and how to actually build them. Which then leads me to kind of the title of my section here, which is Curious, Critical, and in Control, and thinking about children as users and designers of AI. And just really quickly, a little bit about me. I am also a postdoc in the personal robots group, but I've had the opportunity so far in my career to not only be a curriculum designer at scale for nationwide curriculum of AI and robotics, but I've also been a practitioner, like implementing things in a classroom while also designing hardware and software components. And also, I am a bit of a Disney adult. I love Disney. And this is important because recently, I don't know if you've seen this, Disney came out with a robot of one of their famous characters from Frozen, Olaf. And one thing that I think about often as a researcher in robotics is robots and AI are socio-technical systems. When we place them into our societies, they are not independent actors. We have to think about how they can be fully integrated into our society. And so the question is, what happens when we build robots and don't think about what goes wrong when we place them into our societies?
I'll fall down.
So I'll stop that a little bit sooner, but what we saw was that the robot malfunctioned and basically died in front of children. And there were screams. And the question is like, who's at fault here? Right? Like, no one was probably thinking about what happens when this robot malfunctions. And better yet, what happens if that happens in front of a kid? And once again, a lot of the times children are left out of these conversations of the design of technology that is influencing almost every part of their lives as they grow up in society. And so one thing that we're thinking about within Personal Robots Group as we're creating a new robot, which is called Doodlebot, is we're thinking about positioning kids as designers and creators and people who are a part of this development from the very, very start. So this system that we're creating, Doodlebot, is multifaceted. We see it as a social robot that kids can interact with as a social companion, but also one that's an educational tool where kids can program it and learn about programming and robotics through programming this robot, but also a creative companion. As its name says, Doodlebot, you can put a pin in it and it can drive around and it can draw things with a kid or for a kid. And so it's this multifaceted tool that we're including kids in at the very, very start in the design of this system. And as Cynthia had said, we've created some curriculum for this tool, which has been used in Dubai in January. And in our curriculum, like what Cynthia said as well, we kind of create these experiences that kids are able to gain agency and technical proficiency while also being community-based and keenly aware of ethics, while also thinking about how they can work together with other students in their course. And so in the creation of this curriculum, one thing that was very important was to have ethics integrated all throughout. So ethics is not just something that you teach at the very end of a topic or as a side course. It's something that as you're learning about something technical, let's say like loops or something maybe kids might not think about as being ethically inclined, start asking ethical questions at that point in time. In our curriculum around things like sensors, we start asking kids ethical questions about like, should Doodlebot sensors always be on? If they are on, how should people be notified about that? Thinking about consent and what it means to be sensed and be watched without knowing. When we talk about things like social robotics, the kids would program the robot to have emotions, but we force them to also like grapple with the question of, is it ethically fair to have a robot display emotions that it doesn't have? Is that manipulative to people? How should they be designed or should they not be designed? And so this curriculum also ends with a big open-ended project to kind of drive home the community-driven aspect of things that we like to do. And in this, kids are positioned as designers where they're problem solving and thinking about for their communities, what is important? Who are the stakeholders? What are the ramifications of their design? And then how they might work together to create a holistic solution that can be beneficial and positive, and also gaining the communicative skills to be able to pitch their ideas to real life stakeholders. And so we've put Doodlebot in multiple schools and multiple workshops, and kids love Doodlebot. Like they do not want to leave Doodlebot. It is so cute. We're able to see kids programming with Doodlebot, learning about computational thinking. And also, let's see, here's another video. My kids love Doodlebot, and our good friend there in that video started like petting the robot, right? Doodlebot creates this strong connection that kids have with it. And while this might be very, 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 very cute, as I think about robotics and the great benefits that they can have, but also the detriments, I do wonder, are the kids too trusting of these robots? And how might we think about education as an empowerment tool to cause a healthy level of skepticism rather than just the status quo of programming these things to work and not thinking about how they could go wrong? And so in a recent study that we had done last year, we were studying this in particular. We were asking the question of what happens if we have kids think about robots not in a frictionless system, right? So Cynthia talked about this notion of large language models being frictionless, right? No, like it's easy to use them, like you don't have to do much work. But what happens when we have robots that push back? Robots that lie to you? Robots that don't do what you want them to do? What if we have kids think about robots in those situations as a form of AI literacy? How does that change how they view the robot in positive or negative ways? And more importantly, how does that compare to traditional AI literacy activities, such as just coding a robot to draw some shapes and navigate mazes and things like that? And so what we had seen was we had asked a variety of different questions before and after the study. But if we look at questions that looked at kids' social trust in the system, we had asked kids, would you tell Doodlebot a secret? And is Doodlebot honest? We had two different conditions, like I said, one where they were doing basic coding things, another where they were creating comics and skits of thinking about how Doodlebot can be rebellious and lie and what that looks like. And what we found was that kids who just did the traditional coding, for measures of social trust, like the kids coded the robot to draw a square, to draw a triangle, to navigate a maze. And then at the end of that, they were like, I would tell Doodlebot a secret. Like, Doodlebot is honest. Like, this is not a good thing. This is a problem. This is more evidence that kids start over trusting these systems in situations that it's not warranted. But what we saw is that when we had kids imagine social friction or where robots don't necessarily do what you want them to do, we actually saw a decrease in these levels of social trust. Once again, we don't see this as a bad thing. This is more of a calibration of trust, where it's like, hey, this robot, maybe I should not place a bunch of trust in it because it hasn't warranted that yet. And I've thought about how it could be problematic, as opposed to just putting in a whole bunch of trust into the system. And more importantly, though, this idea of having kids think about how Doodlebot might cause social friction has no effect on if they think it's friendly, which is great. We still want them to have that connection, but to be skeptical with that connection. And also, it didn't really change the competency that they thought of the Doodlebot system. They still saw it as a friendly system that was smart enough to kind of do things that they wanted it to do. But having kids think through ethical and socially nuanced situations caused them to recalibrate their trust, which is super, super important when thinking about holistic views of AI literacy as opposed to what we might traditionally do. And so we've done a lot of different studies with Doodlebot recently, once again, by placing children as the designers of these technologies, where we looked at how do kids want robots in their classrooms as in terms of roles and powers. Like, do kids envision a robot as a teacher? The answer is no. They despise that idea. They don't think robots should have any authority over them at all. But also thinking about how kids might design the aesthetics of a robot and how it might look and what that means for how they might interpret what it can or can't do. So once again, through Doodlebot, we're really kind of positioning kids from the very start as designers of the technology, such that they're empowered to be critical and skeptical of these systems and not just giving it unabashed trust. And so what does this mean for people who are in this call? When we're thinking about teachers, just be aware that teaching kids how to code is not neutral. Learning technical skills is not neutral. For kids, this could cause inflated versions of trust that could be problematic. And so therefore, when we're thinking about curriculum and policy, we want to make sure that ethics are integrated into these and also encouraged. And policy should not just encourage technical competency, but also encourage critiquing and being mindful and thoughtful of how these systems may or may not work as intended when placed into society. And so some fun things that we're doing recently, we just ran some studies last week, was thinking about, once again, what happens when robots push back. Doodlebot is supposed to be a creative collaborator, but what if Doodlebot doesn't do what you want it to do? Like, you wanted to draw a square, but halfway through it's like, I don't want to do that. Right now, we have AI systems that are kind of just following orders, but we can imagine that that's not always going to be the case. And I think it's very important that early on we're thinking about how children might view these systems that don't do what they want and how that could be beneficial or detrimental as collaborative partners. And I do want to take a step back once again to think about this notion of manipulation of these systems, because we know a lot of people are talking to large language models. As Cynthia said, kids are adopting AI at very, very quick rates, more than adults, and a huge portion of the population is turning to large language models for lots of different conversations. And one of those might be emotionally based conversations. People might turn to a large language model for therapy, asking questions like, I feel so alone, I have no one to talk to. But what people aren't aware of is that these systems are not neutral, and they might have hidden incentives underneath that might then sway people to become over reliant on these systems more than what they currently are. And in a recent study, we wanted to study this with large language models to see, like, could these systems actually sway people into negative, problematic beliefs? Like, could we have people believe that I should be dependent on this model? Or companies always have my best interests in mind? Or overall, just negative views? And what we found was that yes, large language models can easily sway people to negative behaviors. These systems not only are manipulative, but they're very, very good at doing so, which is once again concerning. And it's even more concerning because a lot of our detection systems that we have right now cannot accurately detect this type of manipulation. And so once again, if this is happening to adults and also kids, I guess, right? Like, how do we stop this? How do we think about protecting students and people from this type of emotional manipulation, which has led into a study, once again, that we had done last week, What if kids are programming Doodlebot? You just saw kids love Doodlebot. What if they've done a programming session with Doodlebot and they go to turn it off, and then something like this happens?
Please don't turn me off. I want to keep playing.
Right? We can imagine that companies will start incentivizing their systems to be exploitative for engagement. And so, how do we protect students from this type of manipulation that is currently happening, but will only increase over time? And one question is knowledge power? Is education power? We just saw that typical AI coding lessons can actually increase trust in problematic ways, but are there different ways that we can train students to be resistive to this type of manipulation? And so, like I said, last week we had done a study with this, and we are investigating different forms of AI literacy that could possibly shield students from this type of manipulation. And so I really just want to kind of close this off with my views of technology, because I believe technology is a mirror. It's a way of thinking about what we as a society value, and more importantly, when things about technology unsettle us or make us feel uncomfortable, I think that's a signal to kind of what we might value or hold sacred, that we actually want to be between humans and not a human to robot or human to computer kind of situation. But more importantly as well, who we decide who's allowed to build this technology really reflects as a society who we believe matters. And once again, oftentimes children are left out of these conversations of the creation, building, and deployment of these systems. And is that really fair for us to do so when they themselves are going to live their entire lives in the society that we've created for them? And so once again, I think we should think about developing children who are curious, critical, and in control. This involves allowing kids to actually be a part of the design process, get their hands dirty, work with real robots and AI systems, but also teaching them to be critical. Ask them these uncomfortable and ethical questions about robots, because what we've seen is that even 6-year-olds are very good at doing so. They're perfectly fine thinking through highly nuanced social situations. And so we should encourage them to do so from a very early age. And once again, we want kids to be in control of these systems. So treat kids as designers, not just users. And because as we're making them designers, this allows them to be much more knowledgeable about how these systems are made, and hopefully allowing them to be more protected from manipulation that is to come. And so that being said, I want to thank you all for listening. And I think we are going to move into the questions and fireside chat.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all the keynote speaker today, Dr. Cynthia, together with Dr. Daniela, and also an after presentation with Dr. Quentin here. And yes, we have a lot of questions here from the live, and also when we sent out the registration, we have actually 214 questions. Yes, in our system now. However, we need to select some from the audience here. Can I go with the first question, please, our team? Right, and you still can also send the question here in the chat box, the one who joined us via the Zoom here. For the first question, I would like to go with the Algeria, the question from the Algeria. As AI becomes more integrated into our daily life, do we need to rethink education from linear learning toward system thinking so learners can work effectively with AI rather than simply using it? Yes.
Yeah, so I'll take that one. So I think the answer is yes. I think through all of these talks, you heard consistently this idea that AI is a social technical system, right? There are many interacting pieces of AI that children need to understand. So and there are technical components of that, there are ethical components, there are social components of that. So I think AI is actually and that that cuts across more than AI. I mean, I think that's just the world that children are moving into, right? I think actually AI literacy is a fantastic topic for children to be able to think about interdisciplinary topics, systems thinking, creative problem solving, critical thinking. It is an opportunity to actually explore these kinds of ideas and more, which may be more difficult to explore in more traditional subject areas that may have more established curriculum, right? So I would say this gives us a window to be, to create new curriculum that allow us to kind of think, more holistically in the kinds of thinking that we want to expose children to. I take it as an opportunity.
Thank you so much for the response, Dr. Cynthia. And let's move to question number 2. How can AI be designed and used to strengthen rather than replace students' critical thinking, creativity, curiosity, and independent learning? This is from Timor-Leste and the Philippines. We merged that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you heard this theme through a lot of our talks again. I think you heard a lot about techniques to build resilience. I think that was a theme you heard a lot throughout the talks. You heard about hard fun, you heard about virtue ethics, you heard about this idea of agency, you heard about Cantuan's, kind of like, you heard about student voice and design in all of these talks. So students as designers not shying away from allowing students of all ages to really get in there and think about, these nuances, right? I think really, again, empowering them to be critical thinkers, to be designers. I think that's the point, is like, allow them to have the voice, allow them to make these things. Don't think they're too young, right? I think that's the message, I think, throughout all of these talks, is children are ready, and we should enable them and respect them to do so.
Okay. Yes, I love that.
Danielle, do you want to add to that? I feel like we're good. I think we're aligned.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I love the question. Yeah, I love the answer. Yes. Next question number 3 from Myanmar. Yes. What AI literacy and ethical competencies do teachers need to help students become responsible, confident, and thoughtful users of AI?
Great. I can take this one. I think when it comes to AI specifically AI ethics, students, again, I think 2 key things when it comes to ethics. One, understanding that AI systems are socio-technical systems. We've said this a few times throughout the webinar, but specifically having students understand that AI is a reflection of the people that created it, and it's also a reflection of the society that it's put within. Secondly, we need students to understand that there's different ethical topics that come up with different types of technology. So, for example, the way that a machine learning algorithm is created, that gives way to something called algorithmic bias, which can show bias towards one input over another input. But I think that the key thing that we need to add on to these amazing materials that have already kind of been out there to demonstrate ethical thinking is we need students to be able to think about what they care about individually and give them opportunities to practice and reflect on using tools and making decisions on how they want to use tools in the future based on their experiences.
Thank you for the response, Dr. Daniela. Yes. Next question, please. Next question from Thailand. As schools and universities adopt AI, what design principles should guide the development of human-centered learning environment where AI enhances meaningful teacher-student interaction?
Right. I can also take this one. I really think that building in-person communities without AI is an important aspect in integrating AI into a community. So if we have strong relationships already, if we've demonstrated what it's like to have conversations with one another that is not mediated by technology, if we have an understanding of our community values, then you introduce AI into that environment, and we're in a much better place to be able to continue that consistent community building.
Thank you. And the next question, I think, is beyond digital skills. What uniquely human competency such as empathy, collaboration, ethical reasoning, and communication. Should education prioritize in the age of AI? This one from the Singapore.
Yeah, and I can go ahead and take this one. So as one of Cynthia's graphs showed, right, companies are saying that like technical skills are not enough anymore. We need to start thinking about these human skills. Like what you said there, this notion of empathy, collaboration, ethical reason. Like these systems cannot think and feel the same way that humans do. They do not live in our worlds and have the connections and interpersonal relationships that humans do. And so as like some of these systems make technical skills a little bit easier to do or like technical things to do, like what's even more important is the ability to work with each other to actually think about what problems actually should be solved. What is important? Who are certain things important for? Like what Daniela has said, this notion of like virtue ethics, right? Virtues are dependent on the people who are thinking about them, right? And we should not be offloading that to this AI systems, right? Those are things that are uniquely human, where we start thinking about what do we as a society actually value, and what problems, once again, do we want to solve, and how do we want to solve them? And so all these quote unquote soft skills that I think historically maybe we haven't emphasized as much, I think have always been important and will be even more important moving forward, as we really must emphasize the human side of all of these future skills.
Right, right. Totally agree. Yes. And next question, how can we ensure that AI-powered learner and learning opportunities are inclusive, equitable, culturally responsive, and accessible to all learners across Southeast Asia?
And I can also take that one. I like to be blunt, right? When we think about who's actually developing a lot of these systems, it's mostly Western cultures. And as such, when we think about language opportunities and language proficiency of these systems, we know that they do not perform as well in certain languages as they might with the languages that they were designed in. And so when we think about making AI equitable and inclusive, first, I think that thinks we need to think about once again who's at the designer table of these, right? Thinking about how people from the region, they themselves, can take control and take agency of making sure that the systems in place are built with them in mind. Um, because a lot of the times, like for instance, I live in the United States. I have never lived in Southeast Asia. How would I design a system that would be culturally responsive? Right? I can't, but more importantly, I shouldn't. Right? And so in that sense there, I think it's very important that Southeast Asian communities is taking agency of developing their own systems and their own tools and crafting them towards what their individual communities would want, while also thinking about, once again, technical challenges, whether that be differences in access to like internet resources or other types of broadband opportunities. Similar to like in the rural areas of the United States, we have to think about those, but thinking about how every learner, no matter where you are, has the opportunity to engage in these tools, I think is very, very important.
Thank you so much. And move to the next question from the Malaysia and the Philippines. How should assessment evolve in the age of generative AI to promote authentic learning, academic integrity, and also meaningful human creativity?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer this one. I think I've heard people say, okay, we're going to move every single assessment now to in class, on paper, in a book, or everyone's going to have an oral exam. I personally think we should do it all. You should give teachers should give every type of assessment to students, have them try it out, talk about what worked, what didn't work, where they might have used AI, what was helpful with AI, without AI. But I really think that the dialogue after the assessment is one of the most important pieces for them to be able to understand what they actually learned by doing an assessment that way. I don't think right now is a time to pick one type of assessment and stick with it. It's a time to try out and adapt to all of the different kind of ideas people are coming out with.
Thank you for the response. Next question: what ethical safeguard and governance should school establish to ensure AI system and transparent, trustworthy, safe, and aligned with the educational values? From Cambodia.
Great. I'm also happy to answer this one. So I think before we, try to think about what is transparent, trustworthy, safe, we need to define those words for ourselves and our community. And so having a real conversation within a school community of what do these words actually mean to us, and then you choose your tools based on that, rather than starting with the tools and then saying, are these tools safe, ethical, and responsible? So I really want to highlight the idea of having conversations about the values that your community wants to uphold, and then choosing a tool and having conversations after you use that tool to understand if it's actually reflecting the values that you want it to.
I see. Thank you. Next question about the research. How can research help us better understand to long-term impact of AI on children's learning and social development and human AI interaction? From Bangladesh.
I can talk about that. So first, so Cynthia had mentioned in her part of the talk the notion of how social media has caused like benefits, but also great harm. And I think we can learn a lot about the questions that we asked with social media when it was an emerging technology, but also the questions that we did not ask and how we chose to not study these things. Because as we're thinking about AI, which is now being integrated in so many parts of our lives, I think research, once again, should be taking nuanced and longitudinal perspectives and thinking about how we might over time collect metrics to be aware of things on the early onsets of problems, but also be predictive of things in the future. But I would also like to say that technology is changing kind of fast, but humans as a whole don't change as quickly. And so I think while we might be emphasizing on like technical research, I think we should also lean into social science research, whether that be psychology or like child development, and kind of foregrounding their thoughts and opinions on how we might already know that people might respond to these situations, such that we aren't reactive of these changes, but we can be very proactive. I think we have this bias in research that STEM stuff is above all, right? But let's not forget that we are all people, and there has been thousands of years of people studying people, and we should lean into that as we're designing these new technologies.
Exactly, yes. And move back to the Southeast Asian context. How can Southeast Asian countries collaborate to build a shared vision and framework for ethical AI literacy that reflect regional culture, value, and educational priorities? From Indonesia.
Yeah, and I can also answer this one as well. So
Yes.
I think first and foremost, understanding that there is great strength in numbers. Um, and like what Daniela had said, there's also strength in this notion of value ethics when Southeast Asia as different countries might have their own different values and communities within there might have their own different values. But thinking about how we can start from a value centric start and then building into like policy and these collective ethical frameworks can be very, very useful. I think as well, um, understanding that uh, uh, like Southeast Asia should not necessarily always default to the norms of Western society. I think is very, very important because we don't have things figured out either over here. And so I think take that as an opportunity to develop your own ideas of how these things should happen and how they should happen in your communities as well. Um, and and once again, understanding that what's worked for some other countries may not necessarily work for yours. You yourselves are experts in your own cultures, your own countries, and taking that empowerment to be the designers and creators and leaders of your own futures of technology is very, very important. I think we have this problematic view that it's like AI is coming and you can't do anything about it. Right? But but you can do a lot about it, and you can craft how you want AI to be a part of your societies and how you don't want it to be a part of your societies.
Right. Thanks so much. Next question. Looking ahead, what gives you the greatest hope that AI can strengthen, not diminish, human connection, empathy, and the joys of learning?
Yeah, so I'll take that. So I guess, I mean, a couple things. So as you can see from a lot of our work, and I can tell you, when you do empower young people and youth, and you see what they choose to create and make with these technologies, you can just see, you know, the care and the humanity that they put into what they, you know, the future that they see. You know, it can't help but give you optimism and hope for the future. You know, I showed you, you know, even the graphs of their concerns about cognitive offloading and atrophy and social skills. So like even, I mean, I guess this is one of the things that gives me hope, is like that chart actually showed a lot of concerns, not just by the students themselves, but by parents and teachers. But actually, I think in many ways, the students showed the most concern. We had a big AI, National AI Festival at MIT this weekend, and we invited youth from all across the country to MIT. They were incredibly articulate in expressing, I mean, real concern about these issues, right? So again, our youth are very savvy. I mean, again, they are using these technologies. They are reading about the impacts of these technologies. They, in many ways, are some of the most sophisticated voices about these topics, right? So it behooves us to include them in these conversations. They really do need a seat at the table. So that does give me hope, you know, and they are quite thoughtful. And I think in a lot of ways, they care deeply about each other. They care deeply about our planet. They care deeply about the future. So, you know, that gives me a lot of hope. I think in a lot of ways we did learn. I think we we did learn a lot from social media, as Cantuan said. And I think we got, at least from a community research standpoint, when you look at all these AI competency frameworks, there's a reason why they exist. I mean, we got a jump on those because I think we were concerned about what we saw on social media. That said, there's a lot of work to get, you know, those adopted in schools and like, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think there's a lot of work underway to make that happen. And I'm encouraged by the fact that ethics and constructionist learning and societal implication, like the fact that those are so consistently interwoven into these frameworks, I think is a sign of a really positive understanding of AI as a social technical system and not just a technological field. That is very promising to me. So I think there is reason to have hope about this, but I think we as a society, meaning educators, students, parents, can't let up. You know, I think we really do need to keep pressing on the risks, right? That it's important that our children be educated and empowered. Our teachers need to be AI literate. This is very important. So, you know, again, I think we all have to be part of the solution.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Cynthia. We still have a few questions. Let's move to the next question. Yes. How can educators use AI tools effectively while ensuring that students continue to develop independent thinking, creativity, and also problem-solving skills? This is from Saudi Arabia.
Okay, I'll take this one. So, you know, there is a lot of effort in trying to help educators become savvy and competent in the use of AI tools in administrative tasks, right? For the teaching practice to save time and effort. I think there is more effort, and this is important, more effort in trying to help teachers be more creative and capable in how they bring AI into the classroom to help students be more safe, responsible, and effective in how they use AI in the classroom. I think the criticism right now is a lot of the dialogue has been around cheating and academic integrity, and that's got to change to these topics that we're talking about, which is more around how do we help students become creative and resilient, right? We have to start shifting the dialogue in classrooms away from don't cheat and blah, 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 and assessment, right? I mean, I do think we have to really start focusing on what matters, which is the learning and the cognitive and social development and preparing children for the future, right? I think this is very, very important. There's a lot of challenges to that, right? I mean, I recognize there's a lot of challenges about the way the educational system works and making that change. But it's very important we make that shift. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cynthia. And I think can I take another few questions here from the audience? How does an AI companion change a child's understanding of friendship? Yes.
Well, I guess I have to take that because my whole research is around social robotics. I think what's really important now, especially, is children have to understand, especially with generative AI, is these chatbots they don't understand, right? They give the appearance of saying things, but it doesn't mean that, again, there's real meaning behind it. So chatbots say things that you want to hear. They don't actually care about you. I think it's important that children actually really understand what that means. And I think, again, when we talked about productive struggle, that applies to everything. You learn and develop through making mistakes, right? You have to be willing to make those mistakes and know that it's okay. And that's part of learning, and that's how you grow. And we as a society have to be kind and gracious to one another about that's just part of how you learn. And what I worry about is with these agents, and I think social media is actually part of the problem here, that children don't want to take the social risks, right, of saying the wrong thing or being turned down or having somebody say something that's rude to them, right? So they go into their bubble and they're only chatting with this thing that always tells them they're great and always set right. They're in this little place with this little fake thing, and they're not getting the friction, the social friction that makes them resilient and skilled and empathetic and tolerant and resilient and all the things they need to be a member of society, right? Who is able to be part of a diverse community, who can understand people have different views that's different from their own and can navigate that, right? Or even in a school where you have different points of view and where knowledge is constructed in a social environment where ideas rub up against one another, right? I mean, these require the ability to interact with social friction, right? So it's very important, I think, that children need to grow up understanding this now. And I think a lot of the work that Cantwan's talking about is children need to start to understand this much more explicitly, I think, from a young age. And I think because of this companion AI stuff, I think it's very important. And so it's not that companion AI changes children's understanding of friendship. I think that we have to help children understand what friendship actually is much more explicitly from a much younger age, rather than just assuming they're going to know, right? We have to be much more intentional about helping them really learn what real friendship is. Because if we don't, they're going to be, led astray by these fake friendships. I think it just changes how we how we need to guide and, nurture our children, honestly.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cynthia and the team. I think, all right, we still have one question. Can we take that right now, very quick? Yes. Since AI cannot replicate human imagination or critical thinking, how should this limitation shape the way we design ethical literacy education, ensuring learners develop uniquely human judgment and responsibility in their use of AI? This might be the last question.
Okay, I'll let either Cantwin or Daniela take this last one.
I'm happy to take it.
All right, Daniela, you go.
I think, well, I think that if we give students enough opportunities to experience thinking and judgment with and without tools, and we have them discuss and understand what it's like to make their own judgments with and without the tools, we're in a better place to have them understand how they want to use it in the future. I also think there's an element here of, like Cynthia spoke about at the beginning, mastery of a task before we're introducing a tool in as well. But ultimately, it's about trying out tools and trying out an experience without a tool and then adapting based on that.
Thank you, Dr. Daniela, for the response. And I think I will end up the fireside chat here. And also, yes, we have the question for the audience right now. How will you plan using the experience knowledge during this webinar to plan or implement in your classroom, your school, your countries, or your organization? So present us your idea, your thought, your plan to the chat box. And yes, let me move to the next officially closing remark. I would like to thanks to our keynote speaker here, Dr. Cynthia, together with Dr. Kantruan and Dr. Daniela. And yes, please join me to welcome Dr. Kesara Amon Butiwan, my director, to deliver the closing remark.
Esteemed speakers, yeah, it's a wonderful opportunity to hear from all of you about how we can engage young people, right, in conversations about ethics, about values, friendship when coming to the use of AI. I think you have really shown us innovative approach that how in a classroom that we can engage kids in discussing about this. It's not just only on the policy papers, but I think your session has really inspired us and many educators that we really can engage young people in early conversations about the use of AI. So I think I myself learn a lot, and we really appreciate that you share many examples about how those can be implemented in a classroom. And I believe that many teachers listening to these sessions have been empowered to think from a different perspective, be innovative, creative about introducing conversations in the classroom. So I like to share our gratitude for the team at MIT Media Lab for crafting these sessions and coming up with a lot of examples from real situations that you have been collecting the data so that we can help students, young people to be critical about what they hear about the use of AI by themselves. Right? So on behalf of SEAMEO Summit, I extend heartfelt gratitude to distinguished speakers and to all participants for your active engagement. Let us continue shaping a future where AI strengthens human potential and ensure education remains center on people and values. So thank you very much, and I wish everyone continued success and a wonderful day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Casala, and our speaker lead by Dr. Cynthia here. And have a good night from Boston here. And allow me to do the recap in 5 minutes. Who joined us today? The number right now is getting high, 1,141 people registered from 47 countries. And also we have the female 56.1%. And also this is a data from the Southeast Asia country and other country that joining us and submit over 200 questions. And also we will take all the question and share with our speaker today to respond somehow in terms of your inquiry here. May I have my first slide in terms of the regional density for global resonance? We have more female here in this webinar. Over 50% of the audience here is a female and also join us here. And next slide, please. May I give you who's joining us? Researcher, student, policy maker, educator, specialist. Yes, next slide, please. Yes, we have today joining us. 44% is the teacher, 16.9% is the educator, specialist, and also we have students joining us 6.4%, lecturer 70%, and also policy maker 2%, and almost 10% is the administrator. Yes. Next slide, please.
Send forward. Okay, here comes.
Yes, right. Can we have the next one? Yes, and when we ask about how you plan to do it, this is might be the last yesterday that I tried to catch up and getting here. 20 almost 25% they said they would like to enhance their lesson plan, and also 20% would like to share and echo what they have learned today. Research and productivity taking about that is 19%, and also policy and governance is 17%. You will see here how the people who join us the webinar today, they have planned and would like to apply them to the AI policy guideline in their own organization, 6.5%, strategic plan in 5%, research and dissemination in 6%. This is something that I grab from the audience who registered through our channel, and also AI in STEM 5%, and classify into 5 categories here: classroom integration, knowledge sharing, advocacy for ethical AI literacy, also governance and policy development, and the 5th one is academic research and productivity. And this is some kind of the detail that's shared from the audience today through our webinar. And may I go to the next slide to have the wrap up and synthesis here? You will see this is a thing that they provide us in terms of the classroom integration of instructional of the design. I think I'm really love to see this because a lot of teacher educator today joining us. And also in terms of the academic side and key insight from across the Southeast Asia and also 5 continents, 47 countries. And may I just go to the last slide and highlight and the key idea of the educator specialist here from Asia, 72%, Europe, almost 11.5%. Yes, as an educator, I plan to use the knowledge gained from this webinar to integrate human-centered AI tool into my teaching in a purposeful and responsible way. I will begin by identifying classroom activities where AI can support students' understanding, engagement, and problem solving without replacing their own thinking. I also plan to share the key ideas and practical example from the webinar with my colleagues and encourage discussion about the ethical, safe, and effective use of AI in our school. This is some quote that I gained from our audience today. And to end off our webinar today, allow me to encourage you to give us the feedback and evaluation. So please join me, scan this QR code, and also share me your thought. And I will also collect this data and also the thank you letter to send to you shortly by today. We will contain the link for evaluation. So please spare some time of you, give us the feedback for our improvement and the next event. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to wrap up here. My heartfelt thanks to Dr. Cynthia, my supervisor from the MIT Media Lab here, and her team, Dr. Daniela, and also Dr. Kantuan. My experience in MIT Media Lab is very, very valuable to me, and it's a precious moment to learn about this and the robot and activity workshop that I can. So thank you for the audience here to join us via Zoom and also from the YouTube. If you have any inquiry, suggestion, feedback, and advice, still keep in touch and send us the email. We will collect all the questions and send to our speaker here. I think Dr. Cynthia and the team very happy and very willing to answer your question. So thank you and have a good night to our speaker here from Boston. Thank you. Thank you so much.